Women in MBA. We're so excited to get started. Let's give it about a minute to let people trickle in, and then we'll get started and jump in. While you are waiting, go ahead and scan that QR code. It's how you'll access the recordings from this session, get access to future events just like this and other resources to support you in your MBA application journey and beyond. We'll also send the link to the chat. It's a link to sign up for Leland. Okay, it looks like we've got some stragglers, but let's get started. Really excited to introduce you to the panelists today and talk about what it's like to be a woman in business school. This is the end. We're nearing the end of MBA week. If this is your first MBA week session, great. We're happy to have you here. If this is your 6th or 7th, way to go. You're almost at the end. We've got one more right after this, and then we've got one more tomorrow. Make sure to sign up for those as well. We'll drop the link to register in the chat. Quick agenda for today. We'll give you a little bit of a welcome to Leland. If this is your first event with us, we'll tell you a little bit about who we are and what we do, and introduce you to our incredible panelists. Then we'll dive right into the panel and answer some questions, and then we'll wrap up. So you know who I am. My name's Amelia. I run all content SEO here. My job is to help you find the best MBA application resources out there, and career resources, anything that you need to get to where you want to go. You'll also see Erica. Big shout out to her. She's responsible for MBA week. We couldn't do this without her. You'll see her in the chat. Now who you're really here for. Ladies, I'm going to have you introduce yourselves. Let's go in order. Oyinda, if you want to start.
Hi, everyone. My name is Oyinda. I'm GSB class of 2023. Studied electrical engineering in undergrad, worked as a consultant at Bain for a couple years before going off as a chief of staff at a fintech company. Right now, I work in private equity as an operating executive, and I coach on Leland as well.
Amazing. Carla?
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Carla, she, her. I currently work in impact investing, but before that, I spent a good bit of time in investment banking and consulting. I had the opportunity to go to Chicago Booth for my MBA, and I also got my master in public policy at the Harvard Kennedy School, so can speak to the dual MBA and PP experience, but really looking forward to being in conversation here.
Halsey, bring us home.
Awesome. Hey, everyone. Elsie Davidson here. I was HBS class of 2022. Before that, I worked at NextEra Energy on the renewables development team, and now I am on the climate infrastructure investment team at BlackRock. Those are my day jobs, but I obviously also coach on Leland, which is my favorite job of them all. So excited to hear more from all of you and hopefully answer questions in a useful way.
We love to hear that. Thanks, coaches. Really excited for us to dive in. We've got some incredible panelists, as you can see. Okay, you know us. We would love to get to know you now. Go ahead and answer in the chat. Tell us, where are you dialing in from? Where are you studying or working? And then what is your dream MBA program? Let's see where everyone is from. Chile. Wow, okay. Working at UI Parthenon, dream is Harvard, so fun. London, England, okay. I know not everyone, this is not the most convenient time for everyone, so appreciate everyone tuning in. Canada, okay. DC, all over the place. Keep them coming. We love to see where you're from and where you want to go. Okay, if this is your first event with Leland, let me just tell you a little bit about who we are. We are building the one-stop shop to help you reach your goals, whether that's business school, investment banking, consulting, taking the MCAT and going to medical school, whatever it is, we have something for you. We do one-on-one coaching with experts just like the panelists on this call. We do free community events like MBA Week and a ton more. You should definitely check those out if you haven't already. And then we also have Leland Plus, which is a content library, all with materials submitted by coaches. You've got 100+ sample MBA applications, videos and templates and other resources. So wherever you're at in your journey, whatever you need, we've got something to help you get there. And this is why we do what we do. These are all admits that have used Leland, that worked with the coaching to get to where they are, and they've all been admitted to some of the best MBA programs in the world. Seeing you guys win is the best part of our day. It's why we do what we do. We are cheering you on, and we just want you to win. So thanks for being here. It's the first step. let's dive into what we're really here for, which is the MBA expert panel. Let's start off with a good one. Tell me about your MBA experience, ladies. Carla, would you like to give us to start us off?
Yeah, and I think I can kind of provide my answer in contrast to what I got from the Master in Public Policy. So I always say that whereas my Master in Public Policy pushed me to exercise the heart, my business school experience really exercised me or pushed me to exercise the brain. It's where, you know, I learned business fundamentals and had an opportunity to deep dive into operations, marketing, product, all kinds of things. And I think for me, the biggest value that I got from my MBA experience, coupled with my time in investment banking, was, you know, I thought I had pushed my limits in terms of what I was capable of, but the velocity of learning and that pace of learning was just something I had never experienced before. And it was like incredibly rewarding. And I think that, you know, that speaks to the culture at Chicago Booth being such an academically oriented institution. But for me, just like seeing how far I could push myself and how much I could learn.
I love that answer. Oyinda, tell me about yours.
Yeah, I always say that my MBA experience is probably one of the most rewarding still, and I'm still like reaping rewards from that experience I've ever had. For me, it was really about the people. It's like having all these amazing people with a lot of varying experiences and like just things to share in the same space. There wasn't a question I wouldn't be able to get answered within the classroom, or there wasn't an idea that was too stupid that someone wouldn't bring to life. I just think being in that environment really pushed my thinking of what was possible and what is and continues to be possible. And just having now this cohort of people that I can always tap into as I go through the same career journeys and experiences as many of them has just been, quite frankly, like invaluable.
I love that response. Alzi, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, echoing what both of the other panelists have said, just kind of the value of the hands-on learning in the classroom. And HBS is really special in that it's 100% pace-based. So you sit in a classroom with your peers from varying backgrounds and you kind of hear their perspectives on different business problems. So that was amazing. The people were amazing. I think what I would really underscore is the value of the network. The value of the network already was reaping benefits when I was still at HBS, but I got my current job because of an HBS alum. I actually have gotten other friends' jobs because of HBS alums. And I think it's such a valuable network to have. And I know it'll be valuable for the rest of my career.
Love that. It's good framing as we dive into this. And I love that we're getting Stanford, Harvard, and Booth perspectives on this. As you've made the decision to attend business school and plan your career, what were some of the considerations that you thought through? And this can be as a woman, this can be in general, just what comes to mind when you think about this. Oyinda, do you have any thoughts here?
Yes. So I think for me, there were maybe three major things that drove this decision, and some of the things that I considered were, one, where am I trying to get to? Like, what am I doing with my career? Basically, I think sometimes we're just all heads down in our jobs or whatever it is we're doing before business school. You don't actually have the time to like stop and think, okay, where's this leading me? What does the next couple years look like? And I thought business school was, one, a great way for me to pause and think, but also two, for me to explore what that could look like and what the options are. Other considerations would just be like, what's the opportunity cost? It's like, if I'm choosing to go to business school, what am I stopping for the next 2 years from a financial perspective, from a relationship perspective, and what am I getting on the other side of that, and just weighing that decision. And then I think the third thing is like, it comes down to the school itself. It's like, what am I like, what does the school have to offer me in line with what I'm saying I want to do? And those were kind of the things I was like juggling with and trying to move the ball around when I was thinking about business school. And I don't know, I think for me, I was prioritizing like a pivot, a complete pivot. I had been working in fintech, didn't want to work in fintech anymore. I was thinking more around like being in a C-suite role, and developing as an executive, developing as an individual, but also a business leader. And then just the time as well, like where would I get the opportunity to see more options and what people are doing? And I ultimately landed on GSB because GSB had like a big angle on people development and who you are as a business leader. And I thought that really tied in well with kind of what I was seeking and the reflective time that I needed.
I love that answer. I think that's really thoughtful. If I could ask one follow-up, those are some big things to think through. What were the ways that you found yourself kind of navigating that? Was it journaling? Was it self-reflection? Was it talking with your friends and mentors? What was like the most effective mechanism to make those decisions?
It was, I think the biggest one was talking to people years ahead of me and understanding their journeys, like how they thought about it, what they had connected, or how they had connected the dots to get to where they were. I also had friends in business school and who ended up connecting me to other people I didn't know in business school and talking about their experiences and what that looks like. There was also a lot of like introspection, and we'll talk more about that, I'm sure, as we talk about this. The application process does force you to actually think about these things. So as I'm spending time thinking about my essays, I'm also questioning my life and then going to talk to someone and being like, wait, does this even make sense? And then understanding what the business school program actually has to offer in tandem with that.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Carla, any thoughts here, especially with the dual degree angle?
Yeah, I knew that the Kennedy School was a big leadership school. So for me, it was more a matter of figuring out what was going to complement that. So whereas Kennedy is really focused on interpersonal work, on understanding your motivations around, what matters to you, Chicago Booth is like such a finance powerhouse. That was especially important to me before going into investment banking. And then again, like such a special place because it's where ideas get put into practice. We have Nobel Prize winners roaming the halls, and it's so cool to see that connection between the academics and the practical side of things. And I will say, whenever I work with folks, this is like a question we dive into a lot, where people are like, oh, like I want to go do healthcare. And I'm like, you should look at Wharton. And they're like, wait, what? And Wharton has like incredible healthcare offerings. So it's going beyond that first layer of like all the business schools look exactly the same. They have the same offerings, and doing that deep analysis to identify your exact goals and figure out which programs are going to give you the best access to those resources.
That's great. And that dovetails perfectly into our next one, which is there's a lot of people here deciding on whether to attend an MBA, actively applying. What advice would you give them in terms of identifying the right programs? Alzi, how did you think about this?
Yes, I think it dovetails nicely from what Carla was saying. Honestly, just tactical advice of how I kept track of all of the different programs that I was applying to. I made an Excel spreadsheet and I basically ranked criteria across the board for each of the schools that I was applying to. And over time, it kind of became clear which ones rose to the top and which ones would be good for the career pivot that I was trying to make. So some of the categories that you might rank, so I'll just say ones that are specific to me, but I was trying to pivot from industry in energy to investing in energy. So I wanted a place that had kind of a strong climate program, but also kind of a strong investing program. I wanted a place that was on the East Coast, kind of tied into my existing network. I wanted a good brand. I wanted specific classes on climate. So just thinking through what programs that specific school has, like Carla said, that's the most useful thing to do, I think, early on in the application process, because in each of the essays, you're going to reference those programs and they're going to feed into your overall narrative. And it's just really good to have a lay of the land. And then one other thing I would say, echoing what another panelist said, is go talk to people who not only are in the business school that you're targeting now, but also have graduated years prior. And you'll start to get a feel for the sense of each school and kind of what the culture is. So GSB is known as kind of touchy-feely, and you'll learn about the foam party and the touchy-feely class. And then HBS is very case-based and has sections. And it's just, you start to get a really good understanding by actually talking to people. And I think that those conversations are super invaluable.
I love that. And that information is not just for your own knowledge, but will help you in your application. It will help you in your interview. It will help you across the board.
For sure.
That's great. Oyinda, I believe you were admitted to a couple of programs. How did you think about identifying the right programs to apply to and then actually attend once you were admitted?
Yeah, okay. So it was kind of a difficult decision because every school is amazing in their own right. But when we go back to what I was saying earlier around what my priority was, I think that the biggest thing for me was personal leadership, identifying who I am as a leader and how I want to show up. And I knew that like the GSB had that like Elsie already said, like the interpersonal dynamics class, and then it's like managing growing enterprises, like all of these classes were really tied to that. I think the second thing for me, in contrast to what Elsie actually said, was she said she was trying to tie in closer to her network on the East Coast. I was trying to go all the way left. Like I was trying to find a completely different network of people that I would not have ever interacted with. And I had a lot of friends. I'm Nigerian, and most of my Nigerian friends were gravitating towards HBS. So I was like, okay, well, looks like I would probably find like one or two other Nigerians at the GSB, and I'm going to go there and like just put myself in this situation that might feel uncomfortable at the time, but also broadens my network. And then I also thought about like the class, the way the classes are taught. I really do appreciate the diversity of like teaching methods that the GSB offers. I don't think I'm a case method girly, so I just was not like as drawn to that. And then with Wharton, on the other hand, like, you know, people say this heavy finance, and I'm not a finance professional. And I know like there are other career paths you could take even if you went to Wharton, but sometimes there's some truth to the biases that people have. And so for me, being more entrepreneurial and looking more to be an operating leader, I was more drawn to GSB from that perspective.
Yeah, this is a great point, that what's going to work for you is not going to work for someone else. And it's worth the time that it takes to think about what you want and what you prioritize. So we've got the people applying. We've also got the people who are considering but aren't sure that an MBA is the right thing for them. Someone in this middle point who's trying to decide whether to pursue an MBA in the first place, what advice would you give them? Carla, do you have anything here?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, listen, an MBA isn't a prerequisite to have an incredible career, right? There are all kinds of people who find success in their own ways. However, I can't stress enough for me and for other folks how incredible of a credential and an opportunity it has been to open doors to have that stamp on my resume, where anywhere I walk in now, they're like Chicago booth MBA, like this person knows their analytics, they know their finance, they are a strong operator. And so for me, I think especially when you think about women and people of color and women of color in the workplace, we know that inequities unfortunately still exist today. And so it just gives you another layer of insurance, of protection, of a credential. And I've seen, I've seen that benefit in shifting from investment banking to impact investing.
That's great. Alzi, do you have anything here?
I mean, yeah, totally agree with everything Carla said. I am such an advocate for the MBA experience, and I think if the concerns are financial, it's worth it. You'll make up your money on the back end, and the experience alone is worth it. But I think women oftentimes have a hard time like being selfish and doing something that advances their own career. And this is probably one of the few times in your life that you get 2 years to be selfish and to be introspective and to think about what you want to do at the next step in your career and explore new things. And it is well worth it. And it's definitely worth kind of taking the chance and applying.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for your answers. That's great. Are there any specific challenges that female candidates encounter in the MBA application process, and how can they effectively address or overcome them? Oyinda, do you have any thoughts here?
Yeah, I have lots of thoughts.
Give them all.
You get into, also, I got into the MBA program and I was talking to one of my classmates, and he's like, oh, I only applied to GSB. I knew I was going to get in, and that was it. Like, I just applied. And I'm like, you just applied? Like, that was it? He's like, yeah, it wasn't that difficult. And, the more I speak to the guys and the girls, and I just realized that a lot of us like already count ourselves out before we even try. And so I think the first thing I would just say is just throw your hat in the ring, like just do it first and then see what happens after that. And this also comes through when you put together your application process, your application package. I work with candidates, I'm reading through the essays, and I'm like, what else have you done? What have you accomplished? What are you excited about? Tell me. And it just takes a lot more like conversation for us to get to that point where they tell me about how they led this thing in their club in college. And it's like, well, that's great. That is a big thing. Like it seems small, but it needs to like, you need to like amplify that and let us like all be a part of that. So again, back to my point, it's like bet on yourself, communicate. Like people are going to make assumptions about you if you don't control the narrative of your own story. And then in the MBA program itself, I think another thing, this might also be a bias, but it felt like I experienced a lot of guys like building community around each other. I remember I was talking to one of my guy friends, and then they're talking about like a trading chat that they had, like talking about stocks that they could buy together and real estate, and they would meet once a week. And I'm like, wait, what? Like, why didn't I get an invite? And so I finally got an invite to this session, and I coming there, and it's like 15 guys and like 2 other women in there. And I'm like, oh, damn, okay. So I would just say, like, talk more about your experiences, build that community, tap into the guys' networks. Don't be siloed or like exempt yourself from things. I think there's a lot that can happen when you lean into each other, especially other women.
That's so important. I think, yeah, Erica, we're getting some hype for that in the chat. Thank you for that answer. And if you don't like, if you're scared or if you don't know if you have those credentials, then talk to a coach, like book time with one of these ladies, and they will tell you honestly to your face. You can do it, I think is the sentiment there. Carla, anything to add?
Yeah, and I mean, I love this question because the imposter syndrome, Ayunda like nailed it, but I do want to give one tangible example. So there was this candidate who reached out to me, and I work with like lots of bankers, lots of consultants, kind of like the traditional profile, but this was someone who worked in philanthropy in rural Oregon, working on like farmer rights, and everything that she thought was a detriment to her profile, I actually like thought it was a strength, and like we turned it into a strength. So for example, she was like, I live in Oregon, I don't live in New York City. And I was like, that's great. Like they want geographic diversity. Or she was like, I'm Mexican American. No one has ever been to college, no one else has ever been to a graduate school program. I was like, that's wonderful. Like you bring an entirely different perspective. So all that is to say is like there's so many opportunities to turn those differences into positives, and just don't self-select out.
Yeah, well said. We'll get into imposter syndrome a little bit more later on. Halsey, I think this is an important question. Anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, don't self-select out. You have the credentials, and actually, I think tying both of those points together, don't and this might be kind of like a hot take, but don't fall into the trap about writing your narrative about necessarily a cliche topic of being a woman in the workplace. Like if that's part of your story and if it's authentic to you, write about it. But you're so much more than that. You're multifaceted. You have so many really interesting and unique things about you. Bring those out in the narrative writing process, and those are what the admissions committee wants to hear. I have all of my clients go through kind of a brainstorming exercise where we have this 20-page document, and they fill out basically their life story. They tell me from early childhood all the way through career, kind of the things that shaped them. And that's what admissions committee wants to hear about. So I would just encourage you to like really dig deep and think about what makes you uniquely you, and write about it in your story.
Yeah, thanks. We got a ton, so bringing it back to imposter syndrome, we got a ton of questions from registrants about imposter syndrome. I think as a woman, this is something a lot of us face in application process, but also in work and in school. Have you experienced this? This can be in work, this can be in your MBA program, this could be in school or whatever else. Have you experienced it? And if so, how did you navigate it? Anyone want to start? I know it's a big question.
I'm happy to start because I pivoted into investing with zero investing background. Look, what I think I've realized is everyone's kind of faking it until they make it. You just have to remember that. Like, no one is a perfect expert, and you are smart. And if you work hard and if you do your research on things, like you can contribute invaluable things to the workplace, but also to an MBA program. It's taken me years to kind of have that mentality, and obviously still building up my confidence, but just remember that you're not the only one who's feeling like that. And there's definitely, I mean, misery loves company, and there's definitely something to be said about that. But know that you are valuable.
Yeah, well said. Carla or Oyinda, anything to add?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I recently had an experience at work where I just walked out of a meeting and I was like, do I know nothing? Like I was like, have I not been to school? Have I not had this great education? Just one of those moments, right? Where you doubt, like, do you have the foundation in anything? And then going back to like the strength of the MBA and the MPP, telling myself I have incredible work experience. I have, these 2 grad school programs under my belt. I did extremely well in them. So when you have those days, it's just it's kind of a boost, and it's so interesting to work with women and gender nonconforming applicants, because oftentimes they are like their harshest critics. Like I remember there was this one candidate, she had like a 3.5 from UCLA and she was a chemistry major, and she was so concerned about, being slightly below average. And I was like, you do realize you were a chem major in undergrad. So, just giving yourself grace is really important.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Oyinda?
I think the one thing I'll add to this is also knowing yourself and like what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are. I think business school particularly helped me understand that, but I could have done that work a lot earlier to know what that is. Like when you know your strengths, you just lean into it and do more of that. And over time, you start to feel good about the things that you know how to do well. And knowing your weaknesses is also important, because then you can bridge that gap. Having a cheat code to maneuver like those kind of situations just helps you deal with the imposter syndrome. It hasn't ever left for me yet. I'm waiting for that point, but at least just finding ways to like work through it is kind of what I've been focused on in this past couple of years.
Yeah, thanks, ladies. We're all waiting for the point when imposter syndrome just disappears. We had someone in the chat ask about Forte Fellowship. Along those lines, are there any specific resources, organizations, or networks that are particularly valuable for women applying to business school, in business school, after business school? Did you use any of them? Carla, I believe you have some experience with some of them. Do you want to speak to those?
Yeah, so as more come to mind, I can drop them in the chat, but definitely the Forte Foundation runs a phenomenal pre-MBA program. And if you get selected for a Forte Fellowship through your school, that is also an incredible network to tap into. Management Leadership for Tomorrow, it's not women specific, but if you are a minority, there are oftentimes opportunities. And then I will say a lot of schools, they don't advertise this, but they do have, scholarships reserved for people with certain lived experiences. And so to Alsley's point, like if your identity as a woman has been instrumental and it's something that's authentic to you, writing about that, could help with those scholarship opportunities. So I'll drop some more info in the chat here, just in terms of broader resources. But yeah, definitely Forte for sure.
That's great. Oyinda, Alzi, did either of you work with these organizations?
I didn't work with those organizations specifically, but the most valuable thing that I did pre MBA application was go to a Women's Day at HBS. So a lot of the schools hold women's specific events, whether they're virtual or in person. And it was really great to kind of network with other women and understand what HBS had to offer in terms of supporting women. So I would encourage you guys to do your research when you are looking at MBA programs to see if they have any of those.
That's great. Oyinda?
Yeah, so I was part of Forte and we've already talked about that. I know I wasn't part of MLT, but MLT is also a very popular one for Black and Latina or Latino applicants. I was a part of Admit Me, which is also it's kind of similar to MLT, also for Black and Latino, and other like minority groups, so like veterans and some other minority groups. So those were some of the resources, and I think those are valuable because then you get access to all of these other like, discounts on test prepping and resources, and just also having a community of people to go through the application process with.
Yeah, Forte, MLT, all of these are great. As Ozzy mentioned too, or one of the panelists, there's a lot of school-specific information. So once you have your target schools, do research on their specific scholarships, their specific groups. There's a lot of resources there as well. Okay, let's dive into the application a little bit more. What were some strategies that you used to stand out in your application and your interviews? And this is a little bit of a broad question. Take it in any way that you want. Oyinda, I'll go back to you to start us off.
I was just thinking about this. I mean, at the time, I don't think I was really thinking, oh, I'm standing out. I mean, when you're going through the process, it's hard to be like, oh, how am I different from everybody else, except you're like an Olympic person or whatever. But I would say that I stuck true to my story. I feel like if you really do the work and introspect and understand your story and your motivations and where you're trying to get to, it's very rare that you find someone with the exact same story, motivations, and like outcomes. And that's why, similar to what Ozzy said earlier, it's like before I even work with a client, like one of the first things we do is our introspection session, right? And just understand all of those dots from the past to the present to the future and how it all connects. And I would think that that is what made my application stand out. And then in the interview, it's also just conveying that even more and building conviction on the other side, like making sure that people actually resonate with your story and understand that, and they see how the MBA is valuable to kind of what you want to achieve.
Yeah, we see this a lot. There's going to be other investment bankers from JP Morgan, but there's no you as an investment banker from JP Morgan. Carla, what about you? What did you use to stand out or to present the most compelling application possible?
Yeah, I think that's right. I always tell people, like, listen, everyone has a story. Like for me, I'm like a first generation immigrant, and so I have a lot of like rich lived experience, but I'm like, listen, if you were some kid who grew up in Manhattan and didn't go below 30th Street, like you still have a story, right? So it's just thinking about what makes you unique, what makes you different. And this is more of like a tactical note, but I do think it's an important one. I really value like good essay writing. I would like to think that I'm like a good essay writer. So working with someone who is a strong proofreader is really important. Some of my candidates call me the butcher because of the red line edits that I make with lots of love. But you just want to make sure that someone is on the same page in terms of thoroughness and preparation.
Yeah, that's great. Ozzy?
Totally. I really don't have much more to add. I mean, just underscoring authenticity and really thinking about what makes you you, and partnering with a good coach to help you think through your narrative. Because sometimes it's really useful to have a thought partner and not do it in a vacuum. I think that one of the things that I learned when I went to business school, I was so surprised by the number of people who had worked with coaches, whether it was an hourly kind of essay editing or a full-on package. I was very surprised. So I think it's such a boost and such a leg up into the process because the three of us have gone through the process with other people and ourselves dozens of times. And there are definitely like tips and tricks to make your application more successful.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that. Coaching is way more common than people think. And
It's a secret. It's a dirty little secret of MBAs. Like so many people use it.
Trying to make it affordable and accessible to all here at Leland.
Exactly.
Okay, to get a little bit more tactical, Carla started us off on this, but what is the tactical piece of advice that you would give your pre-MBA self about the application process?
I would say get the test out of the way ASAP. It is so hard to be writing essays and trying to visit schools and, reading up on fractions, and it just gets really messy. I think the more you can compartmentalize your process and give yourself time, the better. So take the test, get it out of the way.
That's great. Oyinda.
Yeah, I was going to say exactly what Carla said. Test to get it out of the way and start early. Like, don't assume you have time. Oh, I can write an essay in a night. No, you can't. Give yourself time, especially if you're going to do this on your own, you're going to need even more time. If you see you don't have that much time, the coach is even more important at that point, because then you have someone who has the experience and can quickly like find the things. But yeah, give yourself time, take the test, and again, work with the coach, because it took a while for me to get to the point where I actually did go work with a coach, and having done that, I was like, I should have just done that earlier.
This is the number one thing we hear from applicants too, of like, I wish I had started earlier. So take it from us now and start as early as you can. Alzi, what's your tactical piece of advice?
Totally agree on the test. That one was a toughie, and I was simultaneously writing essays and studying for the GMAT, and that wasn't fun. I think one thing I would add is set your recommenders up for success. What I often have my clients do is put together a packet for their recommenders, and because most schools require to, what you want to do is basically put packets together that are complementary to each other. So you want recommender A to talk about how you're good at communicating and leadership, and you want recommender B to talk about how you're really analytical and good at problem solving. And I think setting them up for success is a really important piece of making sure the recommendation letters turn out high quality. And they're actually quite important in what admissions committee is weighting across kind of all the different categories.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't love the recommendation part because it feels like something that you can't control, but you can have more control than you think you do through setting them up for success, through kind of guiding them in the right direction. We actually have a recommender prep doc. I just sent it in the chat. You can use that as a template, and it's got an example too. Thanks, coaches. That's so great. How do you think about, we actually had this question come in the chat too. How do you help your clients think through application strategies and narratives? We've talked about like being unique and kind of digging deep. How do I even figure out, how do I be unique, and how do I put this in an application narrative? Alzi, what do you have here?
Yeah, I mean, I briefly mentioned it earlier, but it's this brainstorming document. It's the very first document that I send clients, and I tell them, treat this like a homework assignment. The more you put in, the more you'll get out. And so basically what I have them do is answer, dozens of questions about, personal elements of their story, but also professional elements of what they've done in their career so far, but also how they want to use business school to kind of pivot into the next step of their career. And then we go through the document. I read it through, I pick out some key themes. We go through the document for an hour and kind of think through what a good start of a narrative might be. And some people already have their narrative pulled together, but I actually still have people fill this out, because sometimes I uncover like a little diamond in the rough in their story that never would have come out otherwise. So I think working with a coach, and I think all three of us do this, just helping you think through your narrative early on in the process before you write a whole essay.
That's great. Carla, Oyinda, anything to add?
I would just say, like, definitely, start early. And then for me, it's all about the why. So for example, I had a client before talk to me about how, work-life balance, work-life integration, this whole thing, like, is really important to her. And I was like, okay, why is this important to you? Why is it that, you had one of your project managers kind of take a back seat whenever they were experiencing tons of burnout? And it turns out that, her sister had like this episode where she ended up in a mental health facility because of how burnt out she was. So through that, through understanding the why, through like really getting to the root of these stories and what matters to you, we can build really strong narratives. So that's what, what I focus my time on.
That's great. Okay, what resource, we've talked about what you can do before your MBA, Forte Fellowship, all of these. What resources on campus were you aware of that helped women succeed, and what opportunities have you had to be involved in initiatives, communities, all this fun stuff? Oyinda, what about you on Stanford GSB?
At the GSB, we had the Women in Management club, I guess. But I thought that was really instrumental in my experience, because one thing that happens in the WIM club is we have small groups that get together literally every other week or every month. I actually don't remember now. But we would get together pretty often, and we'll just talk about what we're experiencing, the things we're going through, help think about like the future and other things, just even personal things. And I thought that was a great one for building relationship, but also too, back to my earlier point around leveraging your communities, like it just helps deepen the relationship. And now like we all know kind of what our drivers are and how we like work with each other to get there. I can't think of anything else for now. Obviously, my friend groups. I think we minimize that as well. Like we for our friends, but my female friends are still like since we graduated. I think our group chat has not missed a day of messaging. So hey, that for me was very instrumental as well.
Yeah, there's set communities, but you can also build your own communities. You can start clubs and you'll make friends and you'll form these groups. Yeah, I love that. Carla, what about Booth or Harvard Kennedy Center?
Yeah, I mean, so many different resources. I will say the really big one that stands out to me is even before I went into business school, I knew I wanted to go into investment banking. So I actually did early recruiting before starting grad school. Those pipelines are usually reserved for women and people of color and veterans. And I had an offer. I had an investment banking offer like walking into grad school. So I was eating good, living good. I was going on ski week with like the second years as a first year. Like it was really fun. So definitely take advantage of, of that special programming offered to women.
That's great. Ozzy, what about HBS?
I definitely want to underscore the point of female friendships. I mean, obviously you make female friends throughout the course of your life and in all the different phases, but there's something special about the friends that you make in your MBA program because they, what I found, just have a similar outlook on life. I mean, everyone there took the intentional step to kind of go get an MBA, and you just find that you're so like-minded with that group of people. And I know that this group of women is going to be my best friends for the rest of my life, which is really special. But HBS specifically has something called WSA, Women's Student Association. So each section, so HBS is kind of sorted into sections. Each section has a women's rep to make sure that the women in that section kind of feel included and kind of represented in both kind of the case discussions, but also in kind of the overall campus. And an initiative that they led probably a decade back was they started tracking participation in classes, and shocker, men were participating more than women. And so now what every professor has to do at HBS is track gender participation, but also kind of other metrics of diversity and make sure that there's an even split. So in the case method, you kind of get called on, and it makes such a difference in the classroom, and you make sure you're hearing from diverse kind of experiences, which I think was kind of spearheaded by the Women's Student Association. Another really great thing that they put on is they do these WSA study sessions for finals each semester. And it used to be only for women, but the men thought it was such a great idea that now it's open to everyone. So they put on kind of these study sessions, but they're women led, and everyone at HBS uses them. Like every single person on campus uses the materials to study for finals. So it just kind of shows like how powerful the WSA was at HBS.
Yeah, that's great. I'm getting kind of hints of your time at business school is going to be in part what you make of it. So get engaged, find these communities, make friends, invest in your time there, and it will be invested right back into you. What are some small or big things that you've worked on personally to empower women both within the business school and in their careers? This was another registrant submitted question. Anyone want to start?
I love mentoring younger women at work. It's probably like one of the most rewarding things I do. So if a new analyst or associate starts, I will go out of my way to take them under my wing, set up coffee chats with them, kind of be an open book and be a transparent person to talk to. I have also kind of guided many of my mentees towards the business school application process and helped them through that as well. And I think they've definitely reaped the benefits from it. So yeah, I think just paying it forward. I had a ton of amazing women mentors throughout my career, and just continuing that path.
I'll say similarly with mentorship, but less so in a work environment. But with the MBA program, in my first year, the Black MBA women had started a group chat with the MBA women in the second year had started a group chat with all of us new MBA Black women in the first year. And that was so it was so unexpected, but a very critical part of my experience. And I really appreciated that. So I was pretty insistent on us doing the same for the years to come. And the group chats is still alive. It's still there. We still ask each other for questions and help and things. And I think that has really, I hope, would form a chain going forward for other like women coming into the classroom as well.
That's great. Thank you. Carla?
Yeah, I mean, it's a hard one to answer, because I don't want to like gloat about myself or anything, but I will say, like, I'm the oldest of three daughters, and so for me, I think, you know, the mentorship piece like comes very naturally, and just like understanding the power of strong women around me. I will say my, you know, my tack is a little different in that I try to focus more on like the policy side of things. So for example, one of my mentors is like very senior at Pivotal Ventures, which is Melinda Gates's venture capital arm, where she also does philanthropy and invests in women's empowerment. And we'll oftentimes get into policy debates about how you can use limited resources to, you know, have outsized policy impact for women, for the betterment of women and girls around the world. And so for me, I'm more focused on like the policy side of things through the Kennedy School, but something, you know, that is equally as important as that one-on-one mentorship.
Yeah, you've all kind of touched on this importance of mentorship, which I think is so valuable. It's something I've experienced. How would you recommend women find other mentors, especially like other women, to mentor them? That can be kind of a weird process to navigate sometimes. Any thoughts? Oyinda, Carla, you're shaking your heads.
Yeah, it's go ahead, Carla.
No, please.
I think it's a very difficult, like you said, Amelia, already. It's you can't just walk up to someone and like, I'll be my mentor. I think the first thing would be knowing who you're even looking at, or like who's aspirational to you, understanding how they got there and maybe some of the challenges that they might be facing themselves. It doesn't always hurt to ask to sit and chat, but in that chat, you don't want it to be give me, give me, give me. It's people love to talk about themselves and the things they're doing, and you give them that space to do that, but also in that conversation, listening to understand how you can fit yourself in their life and the things they're trying to solve for, but also aligned with what you want to do. And you can't always force it. If there's nothing there, then like there's just nothing there. And if there's something there, then it's like, oh, like I want to do this. I'm not currently doing it, but something I see myself doing. Maybe I can, help you along the way, or if there's any way I can help, let me know. And also, it's just asking people that you already have relationships with. Sometimes like a warm intro can be helpful. It's like, oh, I've worked with this person, she's great, she's in this space, and I think it'd be great for her to know or have someone else in this space that's a woman as well. And then that woman is willing to hear you out, and like she's just like, how can I help you? And you better have something to say before you take that conversation.
Yeah, that's great advice. I love the idea of like finding women who are where you want to be in 10 years. And then they have like a very clear idea too of how they can help you and feel like qualified to even help you in the first place. Carla, what about you? What do you have to add?
I think it was covered really, really well.
Yeah, that was a great response. Also, you look like you're about to say something.
Yeah, well, I should really quick, like I will get outreaches from people, and what I really appreciate is when they have like a discrete ask for like what they want out of, they don't even have to say the word mentorship, and I actually think that might even be too in your face. But if they say like, hey, I would love if you gave me advice about this one piece of the sector, or hey, I would love if you just took a quick look at my resume, or hey, I'd love to check back in 2 months just to kind of get your advice on X, Y, and Z. When there's a discrete ask and when they take the initiative to kind of set up a follow-up meeting, it's a lot easier on the mentor to give to that relationship.
That's great. Thanks. Mentorship is so important, and I know it can be tricky to find someone to help you get to where you want to go. Okay, our last one. What is an actionable step that women can take to set themselves up for success before, during, or after business school? Carla, you want to start?
Yeah, I would say one, just give yourself the permission to be a bit selfish in this time. Business school is like such a big commitment when it comes to financial resources and just time. So really allow yourself to fully immerse yourself in the process. And then I think the other thing is I would just also give yourself some grace. Again, I find that women are so harsh on themselves, and it's like if you don't execute to perfection, you can lose sleep over it. Just know there's like no perfect candidate, no like one way of doing things. So just have grace with yourself in the process.
Yeah, well said. Oyinda?
Yeah, I'll say like back to the earlier comments around like understanding what you're trying to get out of this. It would help a lot once you get in business school because there's a lot that gets thrown at you. There's so many options, so many opportunities, so many trips, so many people. And you just really need to know what you want so you're not getting tossed around. That being said, stay open-minded as well within reason. And I say stay open-minded because private equity wasn't exactly, I wanted to be an operator. I thought about a search fund. I thought about going into a late stage startup, but I never really considered private equity until I actually had a conversation around it. So in all of that, have a plan, kind of know what you want to do, but stay open and flexible so that you can be introduced to new things.
That's great. Alzi, bring us home.
Yeah, I think after you hopefully get in, there's a couple of things that you should do. One is get yourself organized in terms of recruiting. So put together a company target list of people who you might want to start talking to in the fall because week 6 rolls around and I think there's a blackout period for recruiting at a lot of schools. But once the people start coming to campus to recruit, it gets a little bit crazy. So putting some thought into it beforehand is super important. And kind of along that line, I would say stack rank the categories of things that you want to spend time on. So I give this advice to every single person who I know that's about to start a program, but you can't do every single category perfectly. You can't be perfect at class and have a great social life and go out and recruit for the world's best job and be super involved in extracurriculars and go on all the trips. You simply just like can't do those. And I tried to do all of those, and I'm sure the other girls on the call probably did too the first 8 weeks. But you learn really quickly to prioritize. So for me, I just kind of made the conscious decision, like I'm not going to make Baker Scholar, which is the top 5% at HBS. I'm going to pour all my energy into recruiting and to building really good friendships. So I think it's just your own personal priorities. And if you think that through ahead of time, it'll pay dividends. Also, I see some activity in the chat. I will add a discount code. I have just been flying all day, so I will add it in the chat, but I also have one.
Awesome. Thanks, coaches. That was so great. Please join me in thanking them in the chat for joining us on a Thursday evening. Thank you, coaches, for your insight and your time. We sent the discount codes in the chat. Oyinda is there. Alzi will send hers as well, and you can also see them here. Work with all of these coaches, whether you're just getting started, whether you want to decide to go to business school or not to go to business school, whether you've taken the GMAT and you're ready to get started. Thank you for joining us tonight. If you are a traditional MBA candidate, so banking, consulting, some of those more traditional routes, highly recommend joining our event right after this. It will start in just 4 minutes. Set up a coaching call, set up a strategy call. We're here to help you, and we can't wait to do so. Thanks, coaches, for being here. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. Have a great evening.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.